Welcome to Spilling Our Tea, the podcast where we explore the intricacies of being Asian and female in today's world, unpacking Asian womanhood and mental health one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Sandy Cusano, a mental fitness coach dedicated to empowering women to prioritize their mental well-being, becoming effective leaders, and connecting with their joy. This episode is proudly sponsored by Joyful Optimist Coaching, where we believe that true joy starts with mental fitness. So today I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Dr. Esther Castillo. Dr. Castillo is a mental health and social justice advocate with nearly 2 decades of experience in education and community advocacy. As the founder of the Chinese Immigrant Families Wellness Initiative at the Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation, which is an award-winning initiative recognized by the C2C Foundation as a local change maker, Dr. Castillo has been a trailblazer in breaking barriers to mental wellness in Asian immigrant communities. With a background as a biracial queer woman, first-generation college student, and a 1.5 generation immigrant, Dr. Castillo's life story deeply informs her work. She has dedicated her career to improving mental wellness and equity for underserved communities, and with a particular focus on immigrant and AAPI communities. In addition to her community advocacy, Dr. Castillo brings over a decade of experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion matters, working across various levels of government, philanthropy, and nonprofits. She is the CEO of Bridging Worlds Consulting, where she provides customized DEI training and services, helping organizations drive systemic change through narrative change efforts and community engagement strategies. And let me tell you, there's a lot more that Esther does on top of that, and you are going to learn more. But of course, she's also a mom and a wife. And just please join me and welcome me, Dr. Esther Castillo, to Spilling Our Tea. Welcome, Esther. So can you share a bit about your background, your personal journey?
Okay. I'm thinking about where I should begin. I like to begin usually by telling people that I immigrated to the United States when I was 19 years old from Macau, China, where I grew up. It was an interesting period because when I was 14, Macau was handed over from being a Portuguese colony to a Chinese special administrative region. So like growing up, there was a lot of political changes. And I really aspired to come to America when I was a teenager. But I think like coming here was sort of like a hit in the face because I thought like America wasn't just how I imagined it to be. I thought it would be so much more welcoming. And at that time, I was enrolled into a community college studying journalism. I thought that I could easily achieve the American dream, but just to be faced with just struggle and discrimination. And at that time, I didn't really have the language to understand that it is discrimination, that it is racism that I faced. Because it's painful and people were not talking about it, and people would just kind of deny the experience when I talked to others. So it was very hard for me to articulate what was happening to me. So after that, I transferred to a 4-year college, continued to study journalism, but then I got an internship at a local newspaper just to like really find out that it was very hard to tell stories in the way I want to, and also being accepted by the mainstream society. Let me rephrase that. I think at that time there were a lot of stories that I wanted to tell from my perspective, but then the feedback that I got from the editor and other colleagues was that my perspective was not the right perspective, or it wasn't the valid perspective. So I was really struggling a lot in journalism. That's when I found sociology. And at that time, like the classes that I was taking focuses a lot on like race and racism inequalities, and it really spoke to me because I experienced that. Um, so I kind of like switched gear and really wanted to study sociology because it spoke to me. I understood it. It made sense to me. And then at that time, I kind of like made the decision that I wanted to be academic, and really work towards it. And long story short, like it didn't really pan out. I stick around in academia for a while. I was really good at school. I think the reality again really like I was quite protected as a student, because after I got my degree, like I continued to go on, continue to get my master's and my PhD, and I got scholarship. I was pretty good at sociology, good at school. It was quite easy at that time. I thought I was relatively quite protected in that bubble as a student, and I appreciated that, right? And I think the reality hit again when I had to find a job as a professor,
Mm.
and again the same old thing happened, like that my perspective again, like people were taking issue with my perspective. It was really really confusing. I'm like, and it like almost like made me question, like is there something wrong with me? Like what's wrong with my perspective? It seems like everywhere I went, everywhere I go, like there's something wrong with my perspective. And I remember the first academic job I got was a visiting professor in a liberal art college in central Pennsylvania. It was, I vividly remember, it was also the year that Trump got elected. So it was tough politically speaking, also like teaching sociology. And I remember having a conversation with the department chair at that time because there was no class about race and racism that was offered in the sociology department. And to me, it was just shocking because the race and racism
Yeah.
is really one of the big pillars of sociology. And so I remember having that conversation, and in retrospect, I realized that my department chair just kind of threw me under the bus and not warning me what to expect if I were to offer a class like that and offer it to students um, in that college. And I was naive, I thought, because now that I knew that at that time, most of the students who were taking that major were criminal justice students who
Mhm.
wanted to become cops, because they weren't offering a criminal justice degree. So it was kind of lumped together into sociology. So I ended up getting a lot of white young men who aspired to be police officer in Central PA uh,
Yeah.
during the year that Trump became president. And oh, geez, it was really hard. And I thought I had the courage to do it, that I had the expertise to do it, that my years of experience in teaching would prepare me for that. But what I did not expect was like I've got students like coming to my office to harass me, asking about my political views and who I voted for, and I've also got like students of color who got physically assaulted,
Mm.
and it was just it was just a really tough time. And um, when I brought and I've got like black students who came to me and got like harassed, and got students who were sexually assaulted. It was a mess. And when
Oh,
I
Esther. Yeah.
yeah, and when I brought these issues to my department chair, there was absolutely no support.
Mm.
Um, I was told that, oh, I should lower my bar with these students and try to understand their perspective And oh, how do I put it?
What?
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, being
I mean,
somebody
all of
who's been told like there's something wrong with my perspective my whole life, like ever since I moved to America, maybe not my whole life, but ever since I moved here, and being hit in the face, as somebody who like got my PhD, got my credential, I thought I would have respect by then, but
Mm.
just being told that I still have to understand why my students were racist to me was a punch in the gut.
Understand and accept, right? It
Yeah,
sounded like they're like, well, just acquiesce, like just accept it as the situation at hand and lower the bar, as you
yeah,
said, lower the bar.
yeah. Lower the
So
bar.
what
Yeah,
happens, Esther? Yeah, for you, you've overcome or you've dealt with so many things, coming to this country. The story of immigration is so interwoven for all Asian ethnicities and heritages coming in. And then, that American dream and the burst of what it is. How do you reconcile these differences of what you thought it was going to be and what it actually turned out to be?
um, I think I spent trying to remember the timeline. So when Trump became president, it was 2016. I came to this country 2003. So in that chunk of time, I was really working on myself, like through assimilation, through accumulating all these credentials, all these degrees, improving my language, doing everything I can within my power to gain respect. Um, I think it was after Trump became president that this ugliness of racism was being shown in a very explicit way. And I actually, before I had an epiphany, I went into deep depression. That was also the same year I gave birth to my daughter, who's now 8 years old. But I was also diagnosed with preeclampsia and got into like a lot of medical issues, was struggling a lot, both physically and mentally. And I think like through those struggles and while I hit rock bottom, I suddenly had this voice in me that told me that the problem is not me, that I am not the problem. The problem is not that I don't have enough degrees, I don't have enough credentials, or I'm not articulated enough, or I don't like, I don't know, I have the wrong posture, or I say the wrong thing. It's not about me. I just had this one thought that came to me very strongly and suddenly that, you know what, the problem is not me. The problem is this country, is the people who have a problem with me. And I remember like telling myself, like, I feel so sick and tired of bending myself and changing myself to make myself more palatable.
Hmm.
And maybe
Because
that
that's
there's, yeah, yeah, it just like it just switched completely after I had this thought that I am not, I don't want to chase after the respect anymore.
a big thing in kind of a theme across Asian cultures, right? As you spoke, it's so similar. Because your background, your heritage is. Do you mind explaining to the audience, Esther?
Yeah, I'm Chinese Nicaraguan. So my dad is mixed race with Chinese and Nicaraguan, and he was born in Nicaragua and moved to China when he was a child. And then my mom is fully Chinese. So I grew up in Macau, which was colonized by Portugal, which said briefly. And I came to this country when I was 19. So I identify as Chinese Nicaraguan. I still keep in touch with like my Nicaraguan side of the family, which is also another piece of unfolding story, which is interesting in itself.
Yeah, sure. So, these biracial um, immigration experiences, but going back to the Asian experience, I'm half Korean, half Japanese, and immigrated to this country. But that, when you spoke about respect, like if I achieve this or do this, I will earn their respect, like clearly. And it just so resonates with me and how it felt being raised, in a very Asian, traditional Asian family. Like, you go get your master's, you achieve these things. And in certain Asian societies, it does work. That is the formula. You get to this level and you get their respect. But in this country and in the Western world, it doesn't always work that way. So I could see the clash that you would have experienced internally as well as externally.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we talk about the Asian experience, you and I have talked briefly, but would love for you to expand more about the influence of your family, especially your mom, what that meant for you and how that shapes who you are today.
Yeah, and this is a um I feel a little bit scared sharing, but I do wanna. So I don't know if you hear my dog at the background. She's can be loud, but I was going to say that I feel scared of sharing, but also feel like it's an important part of who I am, and I um also hear a lot of other Asian folks, especially Asian women, when I talk to them, that there are so many baggages with family. um, and for me, it's especially with my mom, because my parents were divorced when I was 3 years old, and I was raised by my mother. She was a single mom. My dad was like vaguely in the picture, but I mostly like interacted with my mom from a kid, like all the way up till teenage. And My relationship with my mom had, I would say, I wouldn't say always, but it started to become very difficult when I was a teenager. Um, I think it was, my mom had always been very strict, um, to an extent, like not so much of like what I need to achieve or accomplish, but more so like I need to be obedient. I need to be an obedient daughter to her. And not everything is related to achievement. I would say like most of the things that she has a fuss about is not really about achievement. It's more about like she needs to know that I can show obedience to her.
So obedience and control.
Yeah, was like a big thing for her. And she still does like link this obedience to being good. Like she would say something like, I need you to be a good daughter. And what she meant by that is that she needs me to be an obedient daughter, just somebody to listen to her. And um and the control, it was so great. And of course, like being a teenager, like who no teenager wanted to be controlled. And it was really hard. And for a long time, I just thought that it was just like a normal thing, or like it was just like what everybody goes through. But then also, like I noticed like how my friends, like in school, would have a different experience with their parents. And I had like some idea that, okay, what I'm struggling with my mom must be harder, but I wasn't quite sure. I didn't understand what that was. I just knew that it was very, very hard with my mom. And but then it was after I became an adult, I think, that moment when I realized that there is mental illness that is involved in this relationship, was when I told my mom that I was going to get married. So I met my now husband, and we dated for 6 years. It's not news to her. She knew that we were going to, like, that's the route that we are going forward with. But I remember like having this one-on-one conversation with her one day, telling her that, well, like Jimmy proposed. I am very happy. I am just happy that I'm gonna get married. I was in a good mood. I thought I was like saying something. Well, I thought, yeah, it was something positive. I think, objectively speaking. But then my mom just like, after I said that, I like she exploded into this rage that I didn't understand. And she was like, how dare you to be happy? And as an adult, I had some sense like this is not what I was expecting from a mother. Um and then I started like Googling, like, why is my mom like being competitive with me, or is she jealous of me being happy? Like, what is going on? And then I started to suspect that, that there's something deeper beneath the surface. And then I remember like dragging her to see a therapist with me. So we had we had some therapy session together. It was just me and my mom. And then after uh, a few months, like we learned the news that she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And that was the first time I've ever heard about that, about BPD. Um, and I didn't know what to make of it, but then it almost when I first learned that, it was a lot of mixed emotions. It was like I honestly, the first emotion I got was relieved. Everything made sense now. It almost seems like a veil is lifted, and it makes so much sense what I have gone through all this year with her. And it was also validating that I I'm not crazy to think that my relationship with my mom is especially difficult. Um, so that was one set of emotions. The other set of emotions was like I feel a lot of anger, and I wasn't quite sure if it was towards my mom as a person, or towards borderline personality disorder. Because I read a lot of stuff, like they told me that I have to separate the person from the symptoms, but it was just so hard because like she was the one who was doing these harms like directly to me. Like I felt victimized. Um, so it was a lot of anger, and then it was also this tremendous, tremendous sense of grief that I would never have the mom that I needed and that I need, that she will never, like, no matter how hard I try, no matter what I do, that she will not be the mom that I need her to be. And that I have to accept that. Like I've gone like that journey has been ongoing, but then I remember like I have to like imagine in my head that I have to bury this idea, or like have this almost this image of like burying my mother. And like this idea that like this mother figure that I have, and just accept to in order to accept, the mom that I have, you know and it was, oh gosh, it was just so hard. I'm still like, this is still an ongoing journey between me and my mom, because it is important for me to have her in my life, and that's a choice that I make today. I don't know if I'm going to change that choice, but then that has been a choice that I have been making, and it's been hard. And at the end of the day, like, she gave up therapy after she got her diagnosis, because she was very clear that I'm not crazy, I don't have a personality disorder. The therapist was wrong, like I don't have anything wrong, so she quit after the diagnosis. and we never went back to therapy. But I chose to stay in therapy for my own sake ever since then. And and I have been like working through this like without her, because I realized like that I have a lot to unpack for myself with what happened, like, and what's still happening between me and my mom. um and for those who might not be familiar with borderline personality disorder, I don't know if that's even a good phrase to describe, the symptoms, because it's not nothing to do with, like, some people like mistaken it with bipolar, but it's not bipolar disorder. Borderline personality disorder are characterized by people who express this extreme fear towards abandonment, and it's also characterized by like this like very 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 strong emotions when it comes to relationships with other human beings in their lives. um, so what my mom would do is that she has this strong, very extremely strong sense of fear of abandonment, that she's so afraid that she would be abandoned by me. So if you think back to that conversation of me telling her that I'm going to get married and I'm very
Exactly.
happy,
Mm-hmm.
that makes so much sense now, because like
Exactly. Yeah.
when I told her in her head that she's like, okay, my daughter is gonna abandon me, how dare you do
Right.
that
And
to
it
me.
triggers something. Yeah, you're leaving me. Absolutely.
Yeah. So and because of this extreme fear, that is very ironic, and that what people with borderline personality disorder would do is that they would sometimes inflict um their own abandonment to make sure that they are not being abandoned, that they would inflict the abandonment first, if that makes sense. Like, for example, like, because they're so afraid that other people would abandon them, they would do things to hurt them to make sure that they would, like, that they would not have a connection with them. So they would say all these hurtful things to
Push them away
push
or
them away.
make
Yeah,
them leave first, right? And then it's like, oh,
exactly.
they left because on her terms, basically. Or
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, so being in a mother-daughter relationship with my mom means that, like, whenever she feels this fear, she would say all these things to push me away.
yeah,
And then she would, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy for her,
sure.
because she pushed me away, and then now she can call me, like, she's like, see, you abandoned me. I knew that. I knew that you are a bad daughter, because you push, like, you don't want me to be your mom. But then she would say all these things, and then it becomes very hard to get close to her, and it's just almost seemed impossible to maintain a relationship with her, let alone a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
So it's been a real struggle with me and my mom.
Wow, Esther, I'm gonna pause here and just really say thank you for opening this up and being so vulnerable and sharing this. One of the reasons for this podcast is that so many women in the Asian community do not talk about their mental health, about the struggles that we have, and getting help, right? So the biggest issue in our Asian community right now is that most people don't get help. Just like what your mom was saying, even with the help, she was pushing it away and saying, "There's nothing wrong with me." There's a lot of denial and a lot of,
Mhm.
um, you know, aversion to getting treatment and help. And so the importance of at first just talking about it, normalizing what's going on and how people are dealing with these struggles. So thank you so much for sharing and opening up in such a vulnerable way today. It was so brave of you. What what's and I just wanted to share also that what came up for me as you were sharing about your mom was going back to that original version of that voice that you heard that was saying, it's not me. And just I hope that you understand that, in that relationship with your mom as well, it's not you. It's, you know, something that she's grappling with, but it really has nothing to do with who you are in the relationship. How
Yeah,
are you
thank you.
feeling as you're sharing this?
Um, it's interesting. I've never made that connection until you just what you just said. Like I have never thought about that. I think now it makes so much sense because my whole life, like living with my mom, being her daughter means walking on eggshells because she doesn't communicate her feelings, she doesn't communicate her needs. So even as a young child, it was my job to figure out what mom's needs is emotionally, right? Like, oh, she looks upset, or she looks unhappy, or she looks tired, and I would need to kind of she made it my job to read her mind and to anticipate her emotional needs. Um,
Yeah, that has
and
been
so
stressful.
yeah, I didn't understand because I was a child, and she was a single mother, and there was not another adult figure for me there's no other reference point. Basically, I thought that's just what all children do for their parents. Um, so early on, like I internalized a lot of like, oh, mom is unhappy. I must have done something wrong. Mom is sad, maybe because I'm not giving enough to her. That maybe I should try another strategy. I wasn't quite sure if I was born highly sensitive or I'm trained to be highly sensitive or I'm both, right? But I become very sensitive to reading body language. I ever since a child, people ask me these days professionally, right? Like asking me, "Oh, Esther, how do you become so good at reading people?" And I never like like when I was younger, I never really thought about that. Now that I'm older, like because I have been getting training ever since I was a child, I had to watch every single little facial expression, every little move in my mom's body just to get a sense of how she's feeling emotionally, like sensing the vibe. And it allows me to become really good at reading a room when I walk into a room, either being a trainer or educator or a facilitator. I'm just like really, really good at picking up people's vibes. Um, and it becomes a superpower now that I have embraced, and I'm still learning to embrace because like this superpower also comes with so much trauma in my own story. Um, but I'm really trying to integrate, these trauma that are very painful and very hard, and also embracing that that's what makes me special. That what allows me to do the work that I can do. um yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. It would be like, I never thought about these linkages like when you asked me, and until like we brought this up, because like I told you, this like relationship with my mom, I've never really talked about it in a public way.
Mhm. Yeah. So much of who we are and how we react to the world is based on our childhood experiences, right? And, I'm going to, dare to guess that you probably came into this world with those natural strengths. And as you said, over the years and all that constant training, being vigilant with your mom, it probably, obviously heightened those strengths, but also gets to a point for many of us in all the ways that our survival strengths start to become our hindrances, the way we self-sabotage because we overuse our muscle, right? We overuse it, overflex. And so um, it's really important for us to start thinking about first identifying, becoming aware, what are we doing and why are we doing it, but then also to then find the ways that we can kind of get back to the balance of who we are outside of that heightened survival state.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's a hard balance to strike, because if I use it for something positive, and and then that becomes my superpower. But my, like, when I'm overusing it, and then I might be thinking too much, like, oh, he moves his hands like this, or like the leg is tilted towards that way, like what does that mean? Like, when I was younger, I tend to overthink a lot. It has created a lot of anxiety in my brain. And now mindfulness is really important to me these days. And I don't just practice it in terms of like meditation. I try to stay at the present, and I practice it like in my day-to-day life to like just come back to the present moment and not being hijacked by all these overthinking thoughts.
I love it, because that was going to be one of my questions is how do you, manage your mental wellness now, with all that you've been going through. And that's such a key point, is just being present, turning off the autopilot of when we react to things. Um, Curious, how do you see generational healing playing a role for you, both in your personal life as well as, because you're a mom now and you have a daughter, and also in the context of your work, because you do just phenomenal work in all these various sectors that impact the Asian community. Um, is there a role of generational healing that you see for yourself in how you show up?
Uh, it is, I would say, it's very central to what I do, even though that I am still making sense of how to do it as I'm doing it. Um, in terms of my personal life, I have a daughter, and she's 8 now. And I would like to think that I'm the person who break the cycle. I know there are a lot of like conversation around breaking the cycle, and at the same time, it is important for me to check my ego in a way that, oh, this has gone on between me and my mom and my daughter. That must have gone on between my mom and her mom and me. So as much as actually, this, thank you for asking this question, because me and my mom actually got into a big fight, and I have been like struggling to think about what to do with the situation. But it is so easy to say to myself that, well, I'm doing better than my mom. I'm a better person. I'm going to protect my daughter from my mom. Like, that's what my ego is saying. But then also thinking about my mom, like, what if she also tried to break the cycle the best she can? And I'm sure she did. And I would not understand, because like my grandparents have gone through war. I know for a fact. They've gone through World War II. And the scarcity mentality is very, very, very deeply woven into their psyche. Um, and also thinking about like maybe my grandmother was breaking a cycle between my mom and her mother, right? I I feel like all of us tend to um, overvalue like the present moment, because that's a moment that we can actually have an impact on. Um, but I also at the same time want to honor equally, right? Because like I don't want to like say that, oh, my mom did more and than me, or I did more. Like, we all do the best we can, um, and hope that the next generation would not have to suffer so much, or would feel less pain, or or maybe they don't. And I think maybe life is just like, you cannot you cannot live without pain. That would not be living. And I think I'm still grappling a lot with this whole generational healing in my personal life. And for my aspiration for my daughter is that I hope that she can understand that we can all allow ourselves to be imperfect, and that we are just trying our best. And the best we can. And I think that's my wish for my daughter, is that she knows that she can just be herself, and having that permission to be vulnerable and imperfect the way she is, and trying her best. In terms of like my work in the community, um, a lot of my community work in the Asian community, I stressed the importance of intergenerational interactions and activities, and just creating moments where people of different ages can come together. I think it is important, because we can't really make an impact on the future if we don't understand the present moment, and we can't understand the present moment if we don't look at the past and understand how the past have shaped ourselves. um, I think that it is a struggle to create those intergenerational spaces, just like how it is a struggle to create that dialogue and to maintain that commitment for my mom and for me and for my daughter. It is easy to, well, I wouldn't say it's easy to just call it quit. It's also a hard decision, but like people need to do whatever they need to do. And then for me, I'm still trying. I'm still in the struggle. I don't know that if I will ever get out of the struggle. I think it's just how it is. um, and for intergenerational spaces, it's hard because like there's language barriers in the Asian community. There is blame from both sides, I think, and we all can do better. Like the older generation, I hear so much of like, oh, we had it so hard. Like this young generation just don't like not appreciate it. Like they're not grateful. They they're privileged. They are too lazy. Like I hear all these blames. But like not creating that space to understand that the younger generation were raised differently, and their struggles, they still have struggles. It just doesn't look the same, right? I remember having this conversation with an older Asian woman asking me about like why, like she's like curious, like why is this new generation like depressed and anxious? Like we had less and we were not depressed and anxious. Like first of all, they probably were and they were not aware of that. And secondly, I think like and I think like the older generation had something so clear to work towards, right? And it might be like economic stability. It might be like something that is within their reach, even though it was hard, even though it was a lot of hard work. But then they felt a sense of agency that they could achieve those things for the next generation. I think for younger folks, it's like we've arrived at this place that our parents told us to arrive. Like we've done everything we could. We got the degree, we studied art, we did all these things. And now what, right? And then there isn't a lot of, at least the North Star isn't so clear. And this like lack of clarity, I think is can be depressing, right? That we've done all these things, but then we have not arrived at this place that we were promised.
Yeah,
So
and I just
so
want to
yeah,
add to that, Esther, that I feel like we've been told to do these things, and as we do them, they don't bring us the happiness that's promised with them, right? That
exactly.
so there's that missing feeling of, well, I got the degree or I got the job or I got the promotion, but I'm still not happy. And just
Mhm.
starting to understand that to detach our well-being and our happiness from these achievements, so to speak,
Yeah,
and becoming more present and mindful to who we are. I think that is, some of the keys to separating ourselves from these false gods almost keep
yeah,
chasing these achievements.
yeah. These like external validation that we keep chasing. And I think there has to be a dialogue between like the older generation, like for the older generation to open up, like, and to have some empathy about like what the younger generation is experiencing, And for the younger generation to be like, oh, I guess like to understand, like, I don't know. I'm like still looking for an answer, honestly, or like exploring it on my own. That I just I want that acceptance for my mom. Um and and I want to be a bigger person, to not be like, oh, you're horrible, you like say all these hurtful things, or like that's like the default, that's easy. But for me, so I don't know, I don't like, I'm trying to look for answers in the community too. I feel like I give the community as much as the community gives me. um and I think when you ask that question, like how intergenerational healing plays a role in my work, I think the personal and the professional is very much connected, because I'm also looking for some answers for myself personally in the community work that I'm creating.
Totally. Esther, this has been so impactful for me, your story and what you're able to share with us today. I am advocating that we do a part two, because we need to also learn more about what you are doing in the community in all the various ways. And I think our listeners will be really interested. So if if you're game for it, I'd love to have you back and we talk more about also all this work that you're doing and what you're trying to strive and achieve for in
Yeah,
this
yeah,
community.
I would love to. Yeah, I would love to for part two. This has been so healing for me too. So Sandy, I just want to thank you for creating this space and this opportunity for me to talk about this, because like I've told you, I never talked about my relationship with my mom in the public and in such a deep way like this. And it's been tremendously healing for me to like connect the dots, like of like what my relationship with my mom and how it is connected to the work that I'm doing now and with my family as well.
Wow, Esther, thank you. And I know it. I know that what you shared today will reach the ears of someone that needs to hear it and it'll impact them too. So thank you so much for opening up the conversation.
Thanks, Lily.
Yeah, your story is truly inspiring and wonderful reminder of how we can embrace our heritage and navigate our paths with resilience. So, for our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to Spilling Our Tea so you never miss an episode. We're here to spill the tea on real stories, mental fitness, and the joy of living authentically. If you're looking to dive deeper into mental fitness and focus, check out my Joy of Focus Mastermind with Joyful Optimist Coaching at joyfuloptimist.com. It's designed to help you unlock your full potential and connect you with your inner joy. So remember, sharing your stories and normalizing conversations around mental health are powerful steps towards greater understanding and support. Let's keep the conversation going and continue to inspire each other. Until next time, keep spilling your tea with joy.